Thank you so much for that warm welcome. Such an encouragement. It's so good to see all of you here this morning. I know that you've sacrificed time and in some cases treasure, taking time off from work to be with us, and we appreciate it so much that you would invest that time in being here and in seeking to have a godly influence in a place that very badly needs it. So as Jason said, I'm Stephen Hayford, and I'm the Director of Public Policy at New York Families, and it's a privilege. I've been over 12 years with this ministry, and I was involved as a volunteer before that, but it's a blessing and a privilege to be able to serve the Lord in this context. I'm up here this morning to talk about legislation, to talk about what may happen during the legislative session this year in Albany. And so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of the bills that we are working on, some of them bills that we are supporting, and some of them bills that we are opposing. There are thousands of bills that get introduced in New York State every legislative session. Thankfully, most of them don't become law. But some of them do, and it's our job to seek to influence that process and to bring God's word and his truth into it. So, we at New York Families, we encourage, educate, and equip Christians to be effective witnesses and to influence their government, to be effective Christian voices. And so that's the goal of this time here today. One of the goals is that you would be equipped and encouraged to be able to speak out, to be able to talk to your elected officials if and when you're in contact with them, to be able to maybe form relationships with them, to be able to talk to others in your churches, in your communities about what's happening here in Albany, and to do so in a godly and knowledgeable way. We work on 4 broad issue areas at New York Families: protecting human life, promoting strong families, preserving religious liberty, and proclaiming justice and mercy. So I'm going to speak about bills that are in various categories within that this morning. The first bill that I want to speak about is the Protect Girls Sports Act. I have a feeling I won't need to say too much to familiarize everybody here with what the issue is with girls' sports and why we need to protect them. I think everybody probably has a pretty good idea, but just in case one or two of us don't know, the issue with girls' sports and why they need protecting is that we, and including here in New York State, we've been allowing boys to participate in girls' sports if the boys are confused and believe themselves to be transgender. This then is part of a much broader agenda of transgenderism. There are many different bills that fall within this umbrella, many different ways that our state has already given into this agenda, and many different ways that some in our state government would like to promote it even further. So this is just one of the areas in which this mentality is seeking to encroach on our society. I want to read a definition of transgender, or transgenderism rather. I'm going to see if I can do this without putting on my reading glasses, so bear with me. I'm not as young as I was when I started working for Jason. Transgenderism is the belief that every person has a gender identity, an inner sense of being male, female, something else, or in between, distinct from his or her sex, and that when the two conflict, gender identity should take precedence. What we say, and the truth of God's word and of the available science, which reflects the truth of God's word, is this: a person's sex is not a matter of feelings. Amen? A person's sex is an unchanging scientific fact, and it is part of God's creative intent for that person's life. God made every single one of us, and it says in Genesis, as we know, that he made us male and female. I turned 50 last year, and I have to say, a lot of us are probably of an age where we can remember a time where we didn't think we were going to have to be having this conversation, where it would have been unthinkable for us to even have to explain what the difference is between male and female, and to defend the idea that there is a difference. But here we are, and so as Christians, we need to meet the moment, and we need to be equipped for the moment. So here's how we like to talk about girls' sports. Regardless of how a teenage boy feels about himself and his gender identity, he has some advantages over girls when it comes to most sporting activities. Most of the time, he is bigger and stronger and faster than the girls are, in many cases by a large margin. In most cases, he has more musculature than the girls do. There was a troubling incident where there was a transgender volleyball player. Some of you have probably seen this. And he spiked the ball on one of the girls on the other side of the net, and she was injured for months afterwards. It was not a situation that she should have been in. That's just one example of the problems that can occur with people who are actually guys, no matter how they feel about themselves, playing girls' sports. And there's something about this that is not just ungodly, but it's un-American. You know why it's un-American? Because we don't believe in unfair fights in this country. Okay? One of the things that's so upsetting about this particular area in which transgenderism has encroached, one of the things that's frustrating is that I just lost my train of thought. I feel like, well, I'm not going to say who I feel like. I almost said something partisan. I'm not supposed to do it. All right, just give me a minute. The Lord's teaching me humility. What did Bunny say about pride? We're not supposed to have a spirit of pride. I just lost my train of thought. No attention span. It's the internet's fault. I'll blame the internet. One of the things that's upsetting is the co-opting and twisting of the law. We have federal law, Title IX, I believe is the title, although I get them mixed up, that was put in place in the 70s to make it so that girls would have fair and equal opportunities in sports. And now the trans agenda has made a mockery of that. And now we have these guys who are participating in girls' sports, and it's going in the exact opposite direction of where this law was intended to go, because now we have girls who aren't getting a fair shot. We have, for every guy that's playing on a team, on a girls' team, he's taking a spot that a girl should have had. For every guy that wins a race, that's a medal or a trophy that a girl was entitled to. For every guy who gets a scholarship to play a girl's sport because he's transgender, there's a girl who didn't get that scholarship. And then there's all the other issues, like with the locker room, okay? Some of you have heard, raise your hand if you heard of Leah Thomas. Remember that name? Lots of you have heard of Leah Thomas. Leah Thomas is not really a Leah. Leah Thomas, I don't remember the birth name of this person, but he's a guy, and he was swimming for the University of Pennsylvania as a guy, and then he decided to transition, all right? And for the young people in this room, no matter what they tell you in school or on the internet or anywhere else, you cannot change your sex. That is not actually possible, okay? It's a lie. It's a lie from the devil. And if a person goes and they try to change themselves around, they fill themselves full of hormones. God forbid they have a surgery on themselves to try to change their sex. If this is a male, All we need is a cheek swab and a microscope. Y chromosomes everywhere. He's still a guy. He's just a guy who has who has mutilated himself. He's a guy who is very confused and who has taken some steps to try to change his external appearance to make himself look like someone he can never be and was never intended to be. So this man, calling himself Leah Thomas, suddenly is now a star, not now, but a few years ago. He became a star swimming on the women's team. He was allowed to do this because he took some hormones to drop his testosterone levels. And now the Trump administration is working on this, on these issues, but at that point in time, the NCAA would allow guys to compete as women if they dropped their testosterone levels to a certain required place. Okay, say, if you would, give me an amen if you know that a man who, a man who adjusts his hormones and takes estrogen is not a woman. Okay, he's not. But he was swimming on the women's team, and raise your hand if you heard of Riley Gaines. Most of you probably heard of Riley Gaines. She's been very outspoken on this issue. She was on the team too, and she swam against him, and she actually tied him at one point. And she has said that she was told, well, Leah has to get the trophy. Like, she could take a picture with it, but we had to have the storyline of Leah getting the trophy. One of the things that's really disturbing is that this man, Leah, was using the women's facilities. He had not even had surgery. He retained male anatomy, and he was walking around, parading himself around in there. I don't know, honestly, I'm going to be honest with you, everybody. I don't know where these young ladies' fathers were, because if I was the father of one of these young ladies, he wouldn't have been getting in there. That's not going to happen. I'm a man of peace, but there's some boundaries that have to be adhered to. And one of the things that I remember reading was one of the women on the team said, everybody was always asking, all the administrators and everybody were asking if Leah was okay, but nobody asked us if we were okay with any of this. So here's the Protect Girls Sports Act. This is, you have this on your tables, a position paper on this. This is introduced by Senator Alexis White from down on Long Island, and a freshman assembly member Molitor from Western New York. He is from the furthest district from here. It takes him 5 hours to get here. I met with him in the morning one time, and I had a 10 o'clock meeting with him. He had driven in from Chautauqua County, which I don't even know exactly where that is. I've never been out that far. But he is the assembly sponsor of this bill. And what this would do is it would say what shouldn't even have to be said, which is in grades 7 through 12 in interscholastic sports, if we have a girls' sports team, the people on it have to be actually girls. Okay? We shouldn't have to say this, but we do. It would limit participation to actual females. And what this would do is it preserves fairness. It protects girls, young ladies, from the situation of the volleyball player who was spiked on, or the Olympic female boxer who boxed against somebody and was pretty badly knocked around because this person was actually a biological male. It preserves fairness, and it preserves and returns us to the truth about sex and about gender identity. And we need that very badly, because how many of us know young people are getting misled by this agenda? It's very dangerous, and it's very sad for them. We're going to be hearing from Brandon Showalter, who's going to be speaking later today. He's going to talk more about that and how destructive that can be, and not just in a young person's life, but in a family's life. So we are proud to support the Protect Girls Sports Act and New York families. We don't see a large probability of it becoming law in the near term, but every journey starts with a single step, right? So at least the bill is introduced, And there are at least 2 legislators who are brave enough to say what the truth is that this is ridiculous and it's not fair to girls and young women, and we're going to try to fix it. So that's the Protect Girls Sports Act. I want to add that as of last month, 27 states had passed similar legislation. Isn't that beautiful? So we're thankful for that, and we are working towards a day when New York will join those ranks. So, what else should we talk about today? Let's talk about age verification. Okay. So one of the other social problems we've got going on in America right now is pornography. All right? Pornography is very dangerous. It's something that is used by the enemy of our souls to try to ruin lives, to ruin families, ruin marriages. We know what his agenda ultimately is, right? To kill and destroy. So I want to share some statistics. And here are my reading glasses. Just give me a second. The problem is I have to keep them here so I can look up at you. All right. One study that we've cited says that in a given year, 69% of men and 40% of women viewed internet pornography. This was a sampling of young adults. Another study found that 73% of teens aged 10 to 17 consumed online pornography, a number that has nearly doubled since 2014. Around 30% of teens have seen pornographic content at school, sometimes on a school-sponsored electronic device. The mental health world hasn't said for sure whether it deems pornography to be addictive, but well, yes. So they haven't quite caught up with reality yet, right? And one quote from Coven and I's that may not be in the paper, it's on the tables, is pornography gives men a surge, especially men, a surge of dopamine, and it's a high. It's sort of like taking a drug, and so a person who uses this seeks more and more of it and more intense stimulation. Here are some of the consequences that some authors have identified from pornography use: anxiety, depression, loneliness, lower levels of relationship satisfaction, increased likelihood of connecting sex with violence, unhappiness with one's own appearance and physique, and a higher likelihood of divorce. The same authors state that teens are especially vulnerable because they may not have coping skills that are as well developed as adults have. Other potential impacts focused on the family says sexually aggressive behavior, promiscuity, and negative effects on brain development in young people. So, we have a problem socially with pornography, and one of the things that could and should be done is to limit the access of young people to this particular product. And if you think about it, and I wrote a piece that some of you may have seen a month or so ago on our website on this, it makes sense to protect young people from this product and to limit their access. We do this with other things, right? We don't let young people buy alcohol. We don't let young people buy cigarettes. We don't let them buy marijuana, which is now unfortunately legal in New York, which was supposed to be another step on the ongoing march to liberty and justice for all. How do you think that's working for us, the marijuana legalization? Not really great, right? You walk around somewhere and you just get that blast wave wherever you go, some locations. It's not great. So it makes sense. I mean, we don't even let young people get tattoos. So it makes sense to, and is consistent with the policies of our state to protect young people from pornography. So that brings us to the age verification bill, introduced by Senator Jake Ashby. Those of you who were with us last year will remember Senator Ashby was on our panel discussion. He's from here in the Capital District in Castleton. And Assemblywoman Mary Beth Walsh, who's from, I believe, Clifton Park, also here in the Capital District. They are the sponsors of this bill. And what it would do is it would say to the pornography purveyors who are putting this product online that they have to make a reasonable effort to make sure that anybody within the state of New York who is viewing that content online is over the age of 18. They would have to implement some type of reasonable age verification process. And 19 other states at least have passed age verification laws. There may have been some since that number was compiled. This is something that we hope will be able to get legislators in both parties interested in. This shouldn't be a partisan issue. I don't think that a ton of parents, no matter what their political persuasion or even their religious beliefs, are going to be thrilled at the idea of their 12-year-old, their 10-year-old getting access to some of the gruesome things that are out there. So we are pleased to be able to support this bill, and we hope that it will make inroads in both houses and that this is something that can move and become law, even in a state like New York, so that we can protect young people against this. If passed, this bill would allow the Attorney General to impose civil penalties of up to $50,000 a day, $50,000 a day against violators. So it has some real teeth to it that would get the pornography websites to comply. So, awkward topic to discuss, but I think it was important, and we're hoping and praying that this bill will become law. How am I doing on time? Okay. Let's talk about assisted suicide. We've been fighting this bill in various forms since 2015. And I wrote another piece on this recently. Some of you may have seen it. And I checked, and 2/3 supermajorities of the legislature weren't even in office yet when this bill started being pushed here in New York State. So Jason and I and our allies, which we thank God for, have been fighting this for a good long while. I mean, President Obama was still in office when they started with this. And the beautiful thing is that even though the politics of New York have changed during that period and it's become a lot more difficult for us to block bad bills than it used to be, this bill still has not become law yet. And we are very thankful to the Lord. Yes. So let me explain the context of this, maybe for those who are new today and haven't been to Legislative Day before, may not be super familiar. So, it's not against the law to attempt suicide. If a person attempts suicide and very sadly succeeds, that person is no longer with us, and that's a horrible tragedy for them and for anyone that loves them, as those of us know who have lost someone to suicide. If the person survives, we don't try to put that person in jail. Nobody gets arrested because they made a suicide attempt. What we try to do as a society is get them some help with whatever was going on that led them to that choice, and help them to see that life is worth living and get some assistance, maybe with their mental health. What is against the law is assisting someone in a suicide attempt. That is illegal in the state of New York. Those laws have been challenged in state and federal courts and have been upheld as constitutional in both, which gives rise to the legislative battle to change them. So the assisted suicide bill in its current form says this: it would create a carve-out where it would be okay to assist someone else in a suicide attempt in certain circumstances. Those circumstances would be when a person has been diagnosed with a terminal illness and has been told that they have 6 months or less to live. This bill would allow that person to go through a process of making a request for lethal drugs, and it would allow their physician to prescribe lethal drugs for them. It would allow their pharmacist to dispense those lethal drugs to them, and it would allow them then to take them if they should so choose, and to take their own lives. As Christians, the first reason that we oppose this is because we know that the Lord is the giver of life. We did not give ourselves life, and we do not have the authority to take our own lives, and certainly we do not have the authority to help someone else take theirs. That is not for us to decide. I've been working a lot on this issue this year. We're concerned this year with the certain configurations on our committees, legislative committees, where we've been able to keep this bottled up. We're not certain this year if we're going to be able to keep it bottled up there, specifically the Senate Health Committee and the Assembly Health Committee. So we've been doing a lot of lobbying and with members of both parties on this, because currently the state of New York is a Democratic state. Okay, our governor, Kathy Hochul, is a Democrat, and our Senate and Assembly are controlled by large Democratic majorities. So the Democratic Party, at the end of the day, will decide whether this bill is brought to the floor and whether it's passed. When we talk about this, we talk about several issues. There are so many problems with it that we could really have a whole day just to talk about how many things are wrong with this proposal. One of them is what we call the crystal ball problem. All right? How many know somebody who has been told they have X amount of time to live and has outlived it or gotten better? Look around the room. That's a significant number of people who know somebody who that's happened to, and thank God, right? Now let's think about this. Let's think about somebody being told that they have a terminal illness, they have X amount of months to live, and they go ahead and choose assisted suicide. And what if they were wrong? What if their doctor was wrong? God forbid. That's a horrible possibility. Nobody should be comfortable with that possibility. It's a horrible possibility. Those of you who are more, anybody here, raise your hand if you remember J.J. Hansen. He was a speaker at Legislative Day some years back, pre-COVID. Gilda remembers, Gavi remembers. Thank you. J.J. was the best and most effective advocate against this bill in New York State. He was our colleague. Jason and I drove through a blizzard to get to his funeral in Sullivan County after he passed away, and it was a spectacle to see. Jason was driving, and if you've ever been in a car with Jason, it's an adventure just by itself. Forgetting about the blizzard that was going on. And then Kathy Gallagher, our colleague from the Catholic Conference, is a tall woman, so she was in the front, and I was on that little truck seat that you have in the back that's not really a full seat. So I'm perched back there, and we're going through a blizzard, and there's cars off the road left and right, but we were not going to be deterred because we had to get to JJ's funeral. JJ was a military dad. He had been over in the Middle East, and they talk about the toxic burn pits and how it affects some of the soldiers who were over there, people getting cancer. They wonder if some of the things they were exposed to may have caused it. Well, whether it was that or it wasn't, he was a very healthy guy in his 30s, very fit, and he comes down with brain cancer, and he's told that he's got 4 months to live. And JJ underwent chemo and a clinical trial. It was a harrowing experience. He lost the ability to walk and to speak. But he got them back, and he got it all the way back to the point where he was running half marathons and stuff. He eventually died of brain cancer, but he had 3 more years. And he started an organization, the Patients' Rights Action Fund, which continues to operate around the country, working against assisted suicide. And what JJ would say, and what he did say, when he was a speaker at our legislative day down the hall some years back, was, what I went through was really, really bad when I was getting my treatment. And if assisted suicide had been available, I might have done it. I really might have done it. And then I wouldn't have the time that I'm having now. He and his wife had another child after he got better and when he was doing well and sort of in remission. And then the cancer eventually came back and very sadly got him. But those 3 years were precious, and there's a kid walking around because of those 3 years. So when I speak about the crystal ball problem, there are faces, and there's other faces too, but there are faces behind that, behind those words. We need to be very reluctant, very much opposed to anything that would allow a scenario where somebody could mistakenly take their life thinking that they're terminal when they're not, or that they are in a more dire situation than they are. One of the issues that comes up a lot, you may even see them today, the folks who lobby for assisted suicide tend to line the tunnel between the Capitol and the concourse. We probably will see them later today when we go to the Capitol. And they have this sort of, it's kind of a strange display where they have posters of people who died of terminal illnesses, and the point is sort of to say, well, it would have been so much better if they could have had assisted suicide, and there's candles. It's really kind of weird, but they are persistent. And one of the things they talk about is the pain and suffering that people go through. And their idea is that we need to have assisted suicide to give people an out from their pain when they're very sick. That argument is powerful, and the reason that it's powerful is that it plays on people's compassion. Does anybody want people to be suffering when they have a terminal illness or any other time? No, of course not. But it presupposes that the only way to deal with that suffering is lethal drugs. And the wonderful thing that we can be thankful for is that that's not true. In this era, there are ways to help manage people's pain. And the doctors who come from all across this state to lobby against this with us tell us that we can manage people's pain with the pain management, with the meds that are available for people who are terminally ill. And I can speak to it because I lost my mom to cancer in 2020. And I'm thankful that she did not die in agony. She was not suffering. We were able to manage her pain. She had hospice care. She had good health insurance. And we were able to, the doctors were able to keep her comfortable. And so we don't have to choose between unbearable suffering and assisted suicide. Those are not the only options. And so what we at New York Families want is to make sure that the hospice and palliative care are available and utilized. New York doesn't do very well with that statistically. And so we want to see if we can make that more available to people. I want everybody who needs it to have the same kind of care that my mom had, because I don't want anybody suffering through a terminal illness without appropriate medical care. There are so many other issues with this bill. It's just amazing. One of them is, I'll tell you this, dishonesty. I'm going to find the right page. Here we go. One section of this bill would insert a blatant falsehood into New York law. This proposed section states that a patient who requests lethal drugs shall not be considered suicidal, and that a patient who commits suicide using lethal drugs obtained by prescription shall not be deemed to have committed suicide. Excuse me? Furthermore, the bill provides that the death certificate of a terminally ill patient who commits suicide using lethal drugs obtained by prescription shall indicate that the patient's terminal illness, not suicide, was the cause of death. To put it simply, this language would require medical personnel to lie. Isn't it amazing how the left likes to change language? With same-sex marriage, it was marriage equality. Now with the transgenderism, we can just change the meanings of male and female, man and woman, and we even can change, this isn't suicide. Taking lethal drugs isn't suicide. If we say so, then it must be true. Disability rights community is also very concerned about the assisted suicide bill because it creates a two-tiered situation where for most people, if they're suicidal, as I mentioned earlier, we try to get them some help. We call 988, the suicide hotline. We try to tell people life is worth living. The state has resources to try to discourage suicide and different campaigns to try to prevent it. All right? But we would create then with this bill this carve-out that says, well, if you're terminally ill, actually, your life maybe isn't worth living. So not only will we won't try to talk you out of it. In fact, we'll give you a whole mechanism and a process for you to go ahead and do it. And there's concern about people feeling that they've got a duty to die if this passes. There's concern about people being pressured. There's concern about people with disabilities who struggle to get appropriate medical care anyway, that there will be less effort to provide the care, and sort of the implicit thought in the background will be, well, they can just take assisted suicide. The other thing I like to say about this is, and I am a little concerned about this, because this issue has been talked about for 10 years in New York, I'm a little concerned about issue fatigue with our lawmakers. I'm concerned that some of them are going to say, I'm sick and tired of hearing from these advocates on both sides, particularly the other side. The other advocates on the other side are really, they have made themselves noxious to many of the legislators, that they, even to the point of accosting legislators in the elevator, and they can be very confrontational. But I'm afraid that some lawmakers might say, enough already. Let's just pass this and get it over with, and then it'll be over. And so what I've been saying to everyone who will listen to me is, passing this bill would not be the end of anything. It would be the beginning of something. It would be the beginning of something. And the something that it would be the beginning of is the broadening and increasing access to this. And what we've seen, especially in Canada, right north of here, it's horrible what's happening in Canada. They've had this for 10 years. The numbers have exploded. They keep on making it more and more available, and in 2027, they are scheduled to start making, there they actually do euthanasia. You don't hear this bill, you would have to self-administer the drug. There, they will administer it to you. It's euthanasia. It's not just assisted suicide. They're in 2027 scheduled to make euthanasia available for mental health reasons. Imagine that. So what we see is that when these bills pass, they have these procedures and things that are put in place that are thought of as safeguards, but then the advocates for them, after they pass the bill, the safeguards start being thought of as impediments that are preventing this care from being available. One of our colleagues was arguing with someone who came up to us when we were demonstrating and saying, you're trying to keep people from getting access to this care, and our colleague said, so I just want to be clear, by saying care, you're referring to lethal drugs. Am I right? That's the care that you're talking about? This is the care that we're talking about. We need to have, once this passes, if this does pass, forgive me for saying that, if this passes, and we're committed to making sure it doesn't, the people who are pushing for this will start to broaden it out, and it will start to push for more and more. There's already people complaining that this bill as it is now is not, it's too limiting. People are saying, well, what if I'm told I have a year to live? What if I have 6 months or fewer to live, but I can't self-administer? I can't utilize this process. What if I'm not terminal, but I'm in pain? What if I'm suffering mentally? Why shouldn't I be able to have a state-sponsored setup where I can get lethal drugs prescribed to me? If a society accepts the proposition that in some circumstances suicide is an acceptable response, and that it's even okay to help someone do it, it becomes very difficult at that point to draw any line between when this is appropriate and when it isn't. It becomes really hard to justify any line that may be put in place. So if this bill were to pass, it would not be the end of something, it would be the beginning of something. 10 other states have passed this type of legislation so far. We are blessed here in New York to be part of the New York Alliance Against Assisted Suicide. We work alongside members of the disability rights community, the Orthodox Jewish community, the Roman Catholic community, and others. And we've worked together very effectively for the past 10 years, and we are continuing to work and to influence legislators, and you know what? It's working. One of our people spoke with a member of the assembly last year. She's very persuasive about this bill, and she was sharing her concerns, and he said, I have those same concerns, but he was on the bill. He was a sponsor of the bill, and she said, well, maybe next year don't co-sponsor this? And this is a very powerful lawmaker. I'm not going to name him here, But lo and behold, we come back this year, we look at the assisted suicide bill, and his name is not there. I went to his office, and I said, okay. I said, he's not on the bill. Is he going to continue to not be on the bill? And they said, yep, he is not going to be on this bill. All right. So he hasn't come all the way out and said he's against it, but he's moving in our direction. And there have been other lawmakers who have supported this, and after getting more information, they have switched their positions. So please be in prayer for this. Please be in prayer, because if this becomes down the line orthodoxy within the Democratic Party, absent an act of God, we can't stop it here in New York. We can't. Just like we can't stop the abortion policies they've been passing. But right now the Democrats are divided. And so we need to pray that they will continue to listen, that they will continue to have meetings with us and with others, and that the Lord will speak to them concerning respect for human life for those who are terminally ill.